Hi there, you're listening to Unnatural Selection, the show about newsy type stuff and things. My name is George.
My name is Tom.
My name is Adam.
And with our powers combined, we are Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Viewers that are watching live or watching the video after the fact will have to excuse me for being post-beach, pre-shower. But it's summer holidays, and I do what I want.
Back up. You're post-beach, pre-shower, and your hair still looks immaculate.
Good. Does it really look good? I thought it looked messy. I don't think it looks
Oh,
good.
no, you messed it up. No, you fucked the whole thing.
Well, did you swim in the ocean on this beach trip?
I did.
There you go. Okay, well then, yeah, I am quite impressed. That is some...
y'all can eat my ass!
That is a hair product that, that it's doing its job.
It's technically a cement,
that's wild.
as it turns out, not water soluble.
Mm. And if you want to buy this hair product, you just have to dial 999 and pay the credit card now.
5 easy payments of $69.69. 420. Nice. So this is a podcast about news and politics.
First one of the year.
Yeah. New us. Throw the rundown out.
New year, new you. We spent a lot of time discussing the rundown before we got on air, so I was thinking we could go with the rundown anyway, if that's all right. But
now, you know what? I think this year, George, completely unstructured and rambling. I think that's the new format that we should go with.
Isn't that the old format?
Show. I think it's
the old format.
I don't know what you're talking about. It's always been so rigorously structured and considered, and there's planning meetings and everything. This year, though, something different. Keeping it loose.
Always
for the first
throwing
time. Out the rundown. Talk about whatever the fuck we want.
Top story, Kevin McCarthy, News and Politics podcast. We talk about the news in a funny way, but hopefully in a way that doesn't leave us open for defamation lawsuits. So Kevin McCarthy, House Republican and now Speaker of the House, former sourpuss, naughty boy, Kevin McCarthy, has been elected Speaker of the House in the Republican-headed House of Congress after failing the vote 15 times.
No, the 15th time.
After failing 14 times.
Failures.
You're right. Sorry, Tom.
14 goes.
When we're talking about failures over and above the dozen mark, you want to make sure that you have specificity.
Well, when you're talking about failures over and above the baker's dozen mark, you definitely need to be specific.
Baker's dozen, the only dozen that counts in my book. So as
normally, like this vote for the Speaker of the House is my understanding is it's normally like a formality.
It's normally a one and done kind of situation. So basically what happened is Kevin McCarthy, big old duffel bag of shit, and he's more or less been happy. He's one of these chummy sort of Republicans that, one of those, old school, like kind of Joe Biden era politician, obviously a couple of decades younger than Joe Biden, but, senator that, not like the senator that's glad handing and mixing with people of both sides. He just wants to keep everyone happy. And he's, taking home some pork for his district. And well, there are some Republican, so he was initially he was against Trump. And then he was for Trump once he was winning. And then after January 6th, he's like, no, Trump is shit. And then he's gone back and kissed the ring. And so he says and does whatever's politically expedient for him at the time. Now, you might say we're just describing a politician.
Yeah.
But he's what you would call, in the loosest sense, a moderate Republican. That he's not
to an extent
totally convicted to being completely insane 100% of the time.
Sure.
He's just more than happy to be completely insane when completely insane seems to be what's winning.
Yeah, I mean, I think his voting record aligned with Trump's 95% of the time, so that is literally the threshold. Not entirely 100% insane.
He was, I guess, like my understanding is he was sort of the front runner of the party, expected to be the person
he's next
that
in
would
line.
take this.
Yeah,
right.
And so there was a sort of a contingent of right-wing shitbag Republicans, names that we would all recognize, like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz and Lauren Boebert, and the fringe alt-right sort of radical pro-Trump lunatics of the party who were basically just like were dead set against Kevin McCarthy. Now the way the speaker voting for the speaker works normally is you've got the person who's that we think is going to be the de facto speaker. And everyone, if you're in the party that's in the majority, you've got at least 218 votes by definition. And so everyone in the party, more like there might be one round where it's like one person and another person. And then generally by the second round, everyone gets behind the presumptive person because like we don't want to look like a party of radical imbeciles. And the Republican Party said, nope, don't worry about that. So there was never Kevin's. There was the only Kevins, the OKs. That was about as strong of an endorsement as they could get together for Kevin McCarthy. And then there was the never Kevins, and there was about 6 or 7 House Republicans that said, under no circumstances will I vote for Kevin McCarthy. And that leaves you shy of the 218 votes that you need for the speakership. And rather than do what Nancy Pelosi would do in the same situation, recently retired Democratic former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, where she would only bring a vote to the floor if she had the votes. Kevin McCarthy said, what if we just play it back? What if we just keep doing? And the lesson, of course, is that if at first you don't succeed, try again. So on the 15th vote, he was successful. And what was interesting and hilarious to me was that he was losing votes along the way. So
yes, I was going to bring this up if you didn't. The best part of it was that it got worse for him.
It was getting
over
worse.
time. Like, between each vote, when they all then scramble together to be like, no, I'm Spartacus, whatever, or just yelling at each other and just squabbling. They go, all right, vote again. His numbers went down. So some of the people who were like for him then went, no, you know what? I'm just going to dig my heel in now when I was happy to not to 4 votes ago. I don't know.
New people saw him and went, man, that's a bitch ass hoe. I'm not voting for that guy.
What I want to know though is like between each vote, because the first day they had like their family in there. It's meant to be like a really sort of informal, casual day. There's babies in the chamber.
It's meant to be a fun day.
And then people just started like arguing, I guess. But what were they doing between each of the votes?
Arguing.
Was he getting the numbers together?
Well, he was bending over backwards and he goes, look, I'm the presumptive House Speaker. Everyone else is on board with this. What do you want? And they said, we want new rules that say if one person in the House raises a vote to say you lose your job, then we have to take a vote. Like they were just like, I want all the committee assignments that I want. I want everything, all of these different concessions. And Kevin McCarthy was like, great, have them. Let's get back on the floor and vote. And then they would do that. And then they would go, psych.
Yeah.
Sucked in, bitch. It was delicious to watch.
At what point did they go, well, maybe we should put someone else forward?
Yeah, there was another guy, Byron Donalds, who was sort of the guy that they were trying to stand up to vote for him. He was like, they're like, look, he's a black guy. So
and it's fucking funny how performative that was because I've got the step.
No one's ever heard of him.
Which was the first 3 ballots, which were the first day. Byron Donalds had 1 vote, 0 votes, 0 votes. And then on the first vote of the second day, suddenly he's got 20.
Whoa. Byron Donalds pulling away.
And now Kevin's got 201.
He's only got 200 votes. It's a horse race now.
Yeah. And it just goes down, 200 to 20. And then it was 20, and then 20. And then on the last day, suddenly Byron went 19, 17, 17, 13, 12. Like, they just suddenly on the second day went, let's just chuck 20 votes to this fucker.
3 days. 3 days this took. And I think part of it was Donald Trump getting involved.
The 4th day was when he got elected.
On the 4th day, Trump rested. Basically Donald Trump is like, everyone get behind Kevin McCarthy. He's so fabulous. We don't want to ruin the party. And it sort of threw his weight behind Kevin McCarthy, and that seemed to help things break in his favor. But as the presumptive leader of the party, it was as someone who enjoys drinking Republican tears, it was a good couple of days to watch them just self-immolate. And the
14th vote, they had like a scuffle. There was like a full-on scuffle.
People like, I have a family, bro. Like, let's go home.
Well, fucking, was it Matt Gaetz, resident shitheel?
Resident shitheel and fan of his local high school. Matt Gaetz.
Matt Gaetz, who I think he did a vote that was purely just present at one point, just to be an asshole.
So with when you vote present, apparently what it does is it takes you out of the voting pool. So it means the threshold is slightly lower. Yeah. So rather than it being a situation of needing to get to 218, if you just vote present and then don't vote, then it's 217. So it's basically, and he wrote in Donald Trump as Speaker of the House for one of the votes.
Yeah. He was just being a massive shitheel. He even went on the news. I saw, I forget which station, it was probably Fox. But
the Democrats doing while all this is happening, by the way?
They're all just casting their votes for their guy that can never get to the majority.
Hakeem Jeffries. So he's the minority House leader.
They all just 15 times just got in line and submitted
just
all
overdosing on Schadenfreude.
just to the one guy.
Just Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's eyes just roll back into her head, just orgasming with pleasure at the idea of watching the Republicans implode like this.
So Matt Gaetz just said something on the news, incredibly hyperbolic, clearly, but to say that if they established a quote-unquote moderate Republican as the speaker, that he would resign. And it seemed that Kevin McCarthy was the quote-unquote moderate that he was referring to.
I'm waiting on that resignation,
Matt. Hey, Matt. Hey, Matty G. Fuckity bye, right? Fuckity bye. But yeah, it was his present vote that tanked the 14th ballot, apparently. So he was the one that made it go to a 15th.
Mike Rogers apparently had to be physically pulled away from him.
Yes, because he was being such an asshole. That clip's amazing. It's just it's so subtle if you're not looking for it, but you just see someone grab him and just take him away.
Bro.
But I love the amazing picture. I don't know who took this photo in the press corps, but where it's got Marjorie Taylor Greene in it, and she is holding up a mobile phone to another one of the Republicans, Matt Rosendale, who was one of the last remaining people detracting from the Kevin McCarthy vote. And you just see it's her handing the phone over to him, and you can see the screen, and if you zoom in, the ID of the call is DT. And she's just handing it over.
DT's calling, bro.
Fucking Trump's on the phone, man. And he's got a hand up being all get out of my face.
You don't want to get caught call screening Donald Trump. That generally doesn't go well for people.
Why are they looking at answering the phone to Donald Trump in the middle of a session as well? Isn't that
because he's being bro, pull your fucking head in, just vote for Kevin McCarthy. You're making us look like a bunch of morons.
And Donald Trump is saying that. The capital M moron me.
As a medical moron myself, you're making us look like a bunch of idiots, okay?
Good point to mention as well that Donald Trump, presumptive leader of the Republican Party, as George said. The January 6th committee recommended charges with him against him earlier in December.
Oh yeah, that was a good Merry Christmas to us all. It was 5 days before Christmas. They said, "Hey, Justice Department, you should probably charge Trump with a crime." He, I forget the exact quote, but they said words to the effect of, "Yeah, he totally incited the riot."
You know that thing that we all. Do you think that that thing that we all know he did? He did it, y'all.
He did it, y'all. So please and thank you, charge him. And it was we all messaged each other, obviously, as we do whenever shit like this goes down, and we're just woo, that's pretty dope. But we're also nothing's gonna happen.
Nothing's gonna happen.
But it's still pretty good. That fleeting moment, that fleeting endorphin hit that I just got, where just maybe, the bright orange sack of potatoes might go down, but probably nothing will happen, unfortunately. And what infuriates me is when I see the reporting talk about it, where it's the Department of Justice only has a brief window to maybe kind of do anything about this, because if they wait too long, it suddenly looks politically motivated. I'm of course it's politically motivated. You're trying to stop a criminal running for president.
Well, this is the thing: is
there was a political issue.
A number of charges that they recommended, but the only one that would actually stop him running for president or any sort of high office would be the charge of
right?
insurrection. Yeah, so there's a number of different findings against Trump. So purposely disseminating false allegations of fraud, corruptly pressuring Vice President Mike Pence to refuse to count electoral votes, attempting to enlist Justice Department officials to make false statements, unlawfully pressuring state officials and legislators to change the results, and plotting to overturn the election outcome. So these are all like crimes, but the insurrection one is the only crime that would actually stop anything. So he could potentially, conceivably, be found guilty of, for example, corruptly pressuring Vice President Mike Pence to refuse to count electoral votes. He might be in prison in a federal lockup somewhere in an orange jumpsuit that matches his skin tone. And he could still run for president from jail like a fucking mob boss. If they don't get him on insurrection, it's all pointless. Like,
what the fuck? Why is insurrection the significant one? Is
apparently,
that to do
if you that's I believe
constitutional
that's
thing
written in. Yeah, that someone who's I believe it was as a result of the Civil War that someone who's acted against insurrection against the United States can't then run for office and be in a position of high political power.
Seems logical in terms of their thought process. After
yeah. It turns out someone who wants to overthrow the fucking government can't then run the government. That seems like a pretty good rule.
It's like, putting Guy Fawkes in charge of New Year's Eve. You're just a bit like, nah, maybe not.
All right, Guy Fawkes, you're on fireworks. Just, I know, and we're doing the fireworks out of Whitehall. And look, listen, I know you've got some history. We're just going to trust you to be good, okay?
See, I'd just more say, look, we know you know where to go. Like, you know the place. You know the best spots to be putting the 80 launch cannons and all the 80 shot cannons and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, no, we trust you. That's why we hired you.
The thing that I find weird about the whole thing as well is that it's obviously just a recommendation. So the DOJ could just go, because they're doing their own investigation as well, which isn't concluded yet. And then,
and the House Select Committee said, this is not an exhaustive list of all the things. There might be other crimes, other witnesses, other evidence. This is just the stuff that we've compiled for you and put into a brief. I think the objective is to smear Trump, right? To damage him politically, so that, if it does come to a general, like a lot of people, American voters polled were saying the Democrats are focusing too much on January 6th and blah, blah, blah. But then when it came out in polling, one of the major things that people didn't like about Trump and the Republicans in the midterm elections just gone by in November was his support for insurrection. So they're like, we're sick of hearing about it, but also it's pretty fucked up. Did you hear about it? So yeah, it seems as though, it's between him and maybe Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida. But unless DeSantis is able to pull away a decent amount of American voters during the primaries, which, look, given how the display that we saw in Congress over the last couple of days with Republicans kowtowing to Trump, I think it seems unlikely. So look forward to at least another year and a half of campaigning, potentially another 4 years after that of a Trump presidency, God forbid, but
God, it's just so long. It's like my brain just can't process that length of time and having to talk about it. I just want to move on.
I just hope he just needs
bad enough the first time.
He just needs to die. He just needs to cark it, and then all of this energy will just go into this pro-Trump MAGA energy will just go into I don't know, incels or furiously masturbating to Andrew Tate videos. It'll just dissipate into the internet ecosystem elsewhere. Rather than being channeled into political, into voting, one hopes. But
it'll be dispersed into the ether as opposed to focused into the fire hose, so to speak.
Yeah. Have you guys been following this Andrew Tate thing, by the way?
I have not.
Yeah, I have. It's
enlightened me.
It was, the whole circumstances leading up to his arrest was potentially quite amusing, unverified reports and things. But then I was hearing more about what he's been charged for, and it's awful.
Oh yeah, it's
horrific.
So he's been big in I think he's a former MMA fighter or something. He's been big in the manosphere. on the internet. It just goes to show how
I hate that.
fucking unplugged from that side of the internet I am. As I was just like, the manosphere. What the fuck? Who the fuck is this Andrew Tate?
Social media personality, a businessman, and a former professional kickboxer.
Yeah, there you go. So when they say businessman, it seems as though his business is the sex trafficking.
Allegedly sex trafficking.
Allegedly.
So
and he's got like content online. I saw someone doing like a walkthrough video of it being like, him basically giving his masterclass on how to be a Romanian sex trafficker and how to like withhold money from your girls and like all this sort of, command and control type psychological tactics. And yeah, like the stuff he was saying was like, I was like, it definitely seems like he's probably sex trafficking women, getting paid in Bitcoin, so you don't need to worry about taxes. And I was like, no, none of that is no.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the charges I thought that he was arrested on recently were to do with setting up, like creating an organized crime syndicate or something like that, specifically for trafficking women into like
allegations of rape,
cam girl pornography, sort of stuff, but against their will, branding them with tattoos and stuff was a thing I saw this morning, and I was like, this is
some NXIVM shit going on there.
Yeah, the allegations are really, really fucked. So doesn't sound like a great guy. The funny part though was that maybe, just maybe, it was his butthurt, I know you are, but what am I, rebuke video to Greta Thunberg that maybe tipped off the authorities that
that was a story that was going around. It didn't turn out to be true, but
I saw someone make an argument as to how they think they got there, which was because people had said, but he rewind. The reason that video maybe did it was because it featured pizza boxes from a local pizzeria in Romania. And it was the Romanian authorities that were after him.
But I don't think anyway.
But then people also said, hey, he posted a video like 4 days earlier that just said Romania and it had a video of Romania. But as people pointed out, you have no way of knowing if that was filmed at that time that it was uploaded, because the very next day he posted a video where he was clearly in Prague, and the photo that he put up. We all know
what Prague looks like.
Well, some people, those people who just look at a fucking Google Earth image and then go, that speck in the dirt.
I've seen that.
Fucking Croatia.
Oh, they're like, we're in the rural backroads of Uganda. I'm like, how do you know? Is this a bit? What are you doing?
No, that's the kind of thing that spy agencies do. It's what's been happening in Ukraine.
I'm sure there's metadata on the video as well. From
but I think they can tell when it was uploaded and all that. But anyway, and another thing, the photo of him, the reason that he recorded a video with pizza boxes anyway was because he put up some shitheel fucking shit post of being like, I have 33 luxury cars and they put out so many emissions. They're fucking killing the planet. Come at me, Greta, or whatever. And Greta, to her credit, just replied saying cool, let me know. Email me at smalldickenergy@getalife.com or whatever. And everyone's
Imagine getting roasted so fucking hard by a 19-year-old. Imagine getting publicly
you pick a
roasted
fight with a teenager and just get absolutely
and lose.
Fucked. It was great. But the photo that is in his tweet is him refueling his car, and I think someone was like, "That's in Dubai." So you kind of can't go with any of those social media content to know for certain that he is where he is in the picture at the time of posting it. But the pizza box video, he directly replies vocally to that Twitter exchange and has the thing. So it's he's definitely in Romania now. I'm still holding out hope. I reckon he played a part in it.
So he's holding up today's newspaper, Romania Times, and going, listen, Greta,
pretty much.
This is today's date where I understood that was disproved. That it there's so much.
I've been disproved. I've heard not actually clarified by
Romanian authorities. According to Wikipedia, is more up to date than this than the news is.
Imagine how much of a corrupt sex trafficker piece of shit you have to be for Romanian authorities to take notice.
Right?
That's the bit that shocked me. I was like, he was arrested in Romania for sex trafficking?
Which is like, if I understood taken correctly, that's where the sex trafficking comes from, no? Like, it's that side of Europe, certainly. They're like, listen, this guy's fucking so full of shit. We got to do something about it. Even us, the Romanian police, have to do something about this.
Yeah. And then a little part of it that also made me cringe, other than the awful allegations of sex trafficking, was that I think...
And rape.
I don't know, yes. I don't know if he's on bail or something now or whatever, but he came back to Twitter to say something like the Matrix sent their agents after me. He tweeted some sort of dumb bullshit.
Yeah.
But then I also noticed, apropos of nothing, like not seeing these like in replies or retweets, just further down my feed, Elon Musk said a similar sentiment. He just started talking about agents and the Matrix and things. And I was like,
this is the shit that Nathaniel, and Gareth Train on about when they fucking did the shootout in Queensland. There are people that fucking legitimately think, like, so
and I was just like, dumb you have to be. And Andrew Tate makes a reference to the Matrix, and suddenly Elon Musk is doing it too. I'm like, Elon Musk is such a piece of shit.
Are you still an Elon Musk stan, Adam? Are you still prepared to defend your Lord and Savior Elon Musk against all enemies, foreign and domestic?
I wouldn't say so. I do like SpaceX still, though. So we'll talk about SpaceX actually right now.
I used to like Tesla was like the dream car. It's like an electric car. It's cool. I used to be like, man, I'd love to get a Tesla one day if I could afford it. And now I'm just like, you will not see me dead in a Tesla. There is a 0% chance of me getting a Tesla now. Because the guy who runs the company has absolute brain rot from Twitter. He's taken over the company that has rotted his own brain. It's like some sort of cyclical, Mobius strip of like, the guy used to be one of the most he was always weird and kind of kooky. But he used to be more or less respected as like, I guess, sort of a business genius, richest guy in the world at one point. And now he's just dragged his name so far through the mud. Like, there's no way.
Brand damage. There's definitely some brand damage there.
I think the technical term is some brand damage has occurred with Elon Musk.
Yeah, I highly recommend.
Buy a car though. They're electric. I mean, that's not bad.
Nope.
Well, apart from the lithium.
You could give me a car. A Tesla car, and I wouldn't drive it. Wouldn't be caught dead in one of those things.
If you get given a Tesla car, you can give it to me.
I'll turn around and sell it. Yeah, there you go.
But I highly recommend, for some further listening, the double episode of Behind the Bastards about Elon Musk is particularly illuminating. And it was recorded in 2020, so it's pre the Twitter takeover.
Yeah, he was a piece of shit before.
Enough stuff in there to be like, wow, you're a piece of shit. Yeah. So well worth a listen.
But Behind the Bastards chooses their subjects carefully. Let's put it that way.
Oh, yes, they do. Fingers crossed for Kissinger dying this year.
Oh God, that'd be the ultimate New Year's gift, wouldn't it? If Henry Kissinger finally keels over dead, wouldn't that be the best?
Yeah, I can't believe we had like so many deaths at like the first few days of the year. Like, Barbara Walters and Vivienne Westwood and a whole bunch of people, but everyone's like, where the fuck's Kissinger? He turns 100 in May.
I don't, turns out I can never actually fucking die. I have imbibed the souls of my vanquished enemies. All of those Cambodian children, I actually drink their tears, and now I cannot die. I am invincible.
Why is he Russian?
He's not Russian. That was just me fumbling through an accent.
You need a soul to die.
Yes, I never got one in the first place.
I relinquished mine long ago.
Funnily enough, though, he has a really good heart. So in the sense that it just keeps beating.
In that it's a functioning
heart. In that it keeps him alive.
Yeah. Not a good heart in that he has a conscience of any kind of description.
No. Just a very well-functioning one.
Yeah, he's got a well-functioning heart for a war criminal.
Yeah. His heart, it successfully circulates oxygen around his body via the bloodstream, much like the successful circulation of napalm across innocent people in Cambodia.
In illegal wars in Cambodia. Yeah.
Henry Kissinger, history's greatest monster. All right, we were talking about SpaceX before. Yeah, Adam, you had some exciting space news you wanted to drop.
Well, I don't know, exciting space news, but there has been yet another problem with the Soyuz capsule in orbit, or one of the Soyuz capsules that Russia used.
So tell us a little bit about the Soyuz capsule.
The Soyuz capsule has been basically the main bus, shall we say, between Earth and the International Space Station.
You don't have to use that voice. You can just own your nerddom. You don't have to shrink away from it. There's certain things that you like. One of those things is Elon Musk shooting cars into space, and the other is SpaceX, which launches Elon Musk's cars into space.
Elon Musk's cars go into space.
Those are the only two things Adam likes.
It's the only thing he cares for in this world.
That and Armour 3. So, yeah, basically, at the moment, there are two vehicles that are servicing the International Space Station in terms of people. There's the Soyuz, and then there's the SpaceX Dragon. Now, there was a problem with the Soyuz capsule a year or two ago where it was probably sabotaged. Maybe on the ground, someone had drilled a hole through the side of it mysteriously.
Meanwhile, Challenger blows up in space because of an O-ring, and meanwhile in Russia, they're just taking to it with a baseball bat, and it somehow still manages to make orbit.
I don't know. Say what you want to say about the Russians, but they should, no matter how broken it is, it seems to work. But this particular capsule has had a coolant leak. Apparently, it was hit by potentially a micro asteroid. They're not really, or meteoroid. They're not really sure. Mm-hmm. But what that means is that there's now basically three people that are stuck in space. There are an American and two Russians. There are four other people on the space station at the moment, but they can leave on the Dragon capsule that's currently docked, but it still leaves three of them there.
Isn't this the plot to Gravity? A bunch of space debris takes out the ISS, and then they're stuck in space, and they need to make it back to Earth. Isn't this the literal plot to Gravity?
Well, yeah, basically. So the only option they've got now is to do a massive spacewalk around to the other side of the planet, and then get to the Chinese station, and then somehow use their capsule to get to the Earth while having a space battle with the Chinese.
Yeah.
While there's debris crashing around in them, and
nice.
Yeah,
and where's Sandra Bullock during all of this?
Yeah, Sandra Bullock. When does hallucination of George Clooney show up?
Act 3.
Good.
At the start of Act 3.
He goes, I'm too famous just to be in the first act. I booked 15 shooting days for this. I'm George Clooney.
But it's an interesting situation because, in theory, what's going to happen is the Russians are just going to have to sort of launch two capsules, one to bring the new crew on board and one to bring the old crew home. But they're not really clear as to when that's going to happen, how, basically. So the problem is if something happens up there, which it likely won't, but if something does, there'll be three guys stuck in space who aren't going to have really a way to get back.
You have to grow some poo potatoes in order to survive.
They'll have to grow some poo potatoes.
Matt Damon style.
And some oxygen probably. So yeah, I mean, SpaceX are there's sort of questions being asked of SpaceX, being like, well, you've got another capsule, and they can fit, in theory, up to more. I think it's about 7 people, total.
And Elon Musk's staring at his phone, looking at Twitter, going, "Yeah, I'm a bit fucking busy, guys.
Oh God,
I'm a bit busy. I'm too busy for this. I'm doing very important Twitter things, like getting into arguments about the Matrix with Andrew Tate. Got important stuff going on."
Well, I haven't responded just yet, but I mean, in theory, it shouldn't work because SpaceX have very specialized spacesuits that the astronauts have to wear that are fitted to them and custom designed for each astronaut.
And they've got a Twitter HUD, heads-up display, which shows your feed live. So
heads-up display. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so plot to a movie potentially developing in orbit. It's also weird because we're basically at war with Russia.
I was going to say, so even if the whole thing of Russia have to send 2 shuttles up or whatever, one to be bringing the old guys back, but also to send up a new crew. So by the old crew, are they just going to leave the American up there, or do they have to have a really awkward trip home?
Goodbye, Yankee. See you later, bro.
Just a sandwich between the 2 Russian people being like, so where are we landing? They're like, Moscow.
Moscow, yeah.
Cool. Moscow. Okay, cool. Will I be able to get home?
No, absolutely not. No, you're a prisoner now.
Passport? It's like, I didn't need a passport to go to space.
No. Andrew Tate took my passport, said I couldn't leave. So,
oh Jesus.
So I mean, basically, the Americans have been paying the Russians for seats for the last 10 years or whatever. that arrangement is still in place, despite earlier in the war with Ukraine,
despite,
the Russian space agency were like, well, the head of the Russian space agency was kind of like, we could like stop this arrangement if you want, and they've already said they kind of want to stop supporting the ISS as kind of like veiled threats. There's also the concept that that potentially one of the other capsules was potentially deliberately like sabotaged. So there's a bunch of stuff like politically playing out with the space program. But at the moment, they're still cooperating, and in theory, the astronaut that's stranded, the American, would be able to get home. They just would fly him home once they land. But yeah, space drama. I like space. Space is cool.
Fun times up ahead for those astronauts.
Yeah.
Don't envy them.
Speaking of not being envied, Benedict Cumberbatch, is that how we say his name?
You know full well that's exactly how we say Cumberbatch.
How else would you say?
It's a funny thing where you've got to say his name incorrectly.
Oh no, yeah, but you don't say his name incorrectly. You substitute other words that have a similar amount of syllables, and people will still know who you're talking about.
Yeah, like Flanagan Cumberbund.
Yeah, or you just like Burger King Scratch and Sniff. Like, it just works. You just know who you're talking about.
Snatch is the thing that's coming to my brain, but that could be, let's not go there. Anyway.
I also liked When Picnic Remember Snacks is another one that I've heard.
It's fun because it's also mnemonic as well. It helps you remember snacks for your picnic.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, it's a life lesson and a joke.
A bit.
I don't know. Yeah, but so... I mean, I don't know if we'll have a whole lot to say about this, but it's just been a big sort of news piece over the past couple of days that's sort of come out. So Barbados, for a long time, has been seeking reparations to, British colonial powers for, slave trading and all those horrible things that colonization brings.
Yeah, slavery, not just the thing that happens in Romania with Andrew Tate, allegedly.
Oh, Jesus.
Some more Andrew Tate jokes in, George, please.
It's just a bit of Schadenfreude.
Yeah.
It's nice when you see bags of shit go down. It's just nice.
100%. So Barbados has been looking for reparations for slavery and the atrocities of slavery.
It's not
perpetrated
specifically. It's an organization within Barbados. So it's the Caribbean Movement for Peace and Integration.
So but they've sort of changed their tactic a little bit because I think in previous instances they've been focusing on like institutions and countries, but as sort of reported here, they're now also looking at targeting the wealthy descendants of individual slave owners from the time. And sort of why this has sort of hit the news a bit more is that one of those potential people is Benedict Cumberbatch. Because the Cumberbatch family, way back in the 1700s, was one of the wealthiest families in England, and they owned a sugar plantation in Barbados, and it's believed more than 250 enslaved people worked on the estate at the time.
We call them enforced volunteers, Tom.
Ah, right. So like I think the family, the Cumberbatches specifically, like sold the plantation like 189 years ago. They've got here, but this class action sort of movement in Barbados is targeting people like Benedict Cumberbatch and others for reparation payments for the actions of their ancestors. So this is always a very tricky, delicate thing, particularly for three white guys to talk about. But I just thought it was it's an interesting situation to be going after like sort of individuals rather than the countries. I mean, I guess of course, if you're not fucking getting anywhere from like the British Parliament or, Crown or anything, because they'll stonewall the absolute shit out of you. I mean, yeah, you can be pursuing where you want.
Surely it's just it's to get a news item, right? So people like us are talking about
that too.
I don't think there's any real possibility of, and presumably Benedict Cumberbatch is a multimillionaire in his own right from his movie career, many, many times over. I'm sure more than whatever family money was left over from hundreds of years ago. So clearly it seems like an attempt to go after a famous person that everyone knows in order to get some headlines. Like if the British government doesn't have to give back the Acropolis marbles, which they're like, oh yeah, no, we stole them. Like Lord Elgin just went over, said he was going to do some plaster castings, and then we just fucking took them. Hey, like if and even modern historians, British historians are like, oh, we can look after them better than the Greeks can. And the Greeks are like, we've got a multi-billion-dollar Acropolis museum, like 200-300 meters away from the Acropolis. We could definitely look after those marbles. And they're like, yeah, don't worry, darling. We're just going to hang on to these. Like, if that is not going to get any kind of reparations, or they just need to send it back. They could just send the marbles back.
Yeah, and they 100% should.
Yes, and they should.
Is the point.
But they're not going to, is my point.
If they can't do this, it's like, well, it's not so much that they can't, it's that Britain is refusing to, and that's wrong. Yeah. So Britain should do that.
Yeah,
you should do that.
You can't compel them, I guess is my point. There's not a legal mechanism in place to actually make them do that.
I want to take them to an international arbitration court, but I don't know.
Well, that's why
sort of what laws you could do,
and that's where this situation will be an interesting result, because I guess what comes of this, if it gets to a court and all that sort of stuff, will be a bit of a precedent setter. Like if a court finds that maybe someone like Benedict Cumberbatch is then liable, or like should be compelled to pay reparations in this context.
I don't see how
precedent that's set.
I'm
not a lawyer, so
I'm totally all for like historically obnoxious fucking family lines to be pestered and annoyed, and maybe even perhaps have to pay some reparations. But like Benedict Cumberbatch seems like a good guy. And whereas like the Habsburg, there's like Eric Habsburg is still a guy who's like on Twitter and seems to be like not totally like unpersuaded by the ideas of fascism, and seems to be like a bit of a shithead on Twitter. I'm like, that guy, fuck up some Habsburgs. Let's go, man.
It's very interesting in that sense, because you're right. Like Benedict Cumberbatch is a very wealthy person thanks to, his successful acting career and all that, and like, being in Marvel movies and everything. So it's one of those like, oh, he presumably has the capital to be able to pay reparations. I haven't got in front of me, I think, here exactly like what, if there's a dollar figure for him specifically that they'd be chasing him for or whatever. But the purpose is that like he might have the capital to do so, and so it's one of those like, oh, well, yeah, you're a wealthy descendant of this sort of stuff, so you as an individual could pay it. But I guess it's more like, some of these people, though, might not, like, there might be people who aren't wealthy people now, but are descendant from huge wealthy British families.
We're not holding accountable the royal families that exist now that are direct descendants from the people who were in charge when colonial things happened.
So namely, that's what I mean.
The British monarchy, like who directly oversaw a lot of the atrocities that we're describing. So it's like, well, if we're not holding those people responsible, why? And people who are still wealthy as a result of the extractive, practices that they exploited during the colonialism period.
Yeah. Which I think is another point that's kind of brought up later on in this piece here. So that was sort of the rest of my point, was that, like, I think more just on a general standpoint, it should be more the responsibility of the British Crown and the British government to be paying reparations to these places, because like they are the representatives of the institution that allowed it. Like, I mean, you'll like for every like wealthy person, individual now who is benefiting from it, whose ancestors benefited from it, that is wealthy, like Benedict Cumberbatch, there'll be those who aren't. And that's when that gets a bit tricky.
I don't think they're going after people necessarily that have it. Like the term that the General Secretary David Denny said was that the sentence he used was any descendants of white plantation owners who have benefited from the slave trade should be asked to pay reparations, including the Cumberbatch family, which makes me think that there is obviously some family wealth there, which you could directly tie to.
I guess you'd also tie it to, like, you know, it's there's the whole conversation around privilege, right? Like, you know, you could be like, well, sure, maybe all the money that Benedict Cumberbatch has to himself as an individual could be derived from his multi-gajillion $1 million Marvel deals and whatever, but the, I don't know, wealth of his parents allowed him the opportunities to be getting into that point as an individual, and then obviously that means the wealth of his grandparents allowed his parents to do what they did, and et cetera, et cetera. So so while the specific dollars that Benedict Cumberbatch has aren't from the pile of gold that amassed from slave trading, it's like that wealth generated at the time on the backs of those enslaved people led to this sort of one way or another. I know it's an incredibly simplistic way to look at it, but I think where we're getting here, because to George's point of like, fuck that guy on Twitter, like, hey, let's, like, you know, it sounds like he should be held individually responsible.
Just because he's a dickhead, and his family is also, you know, like members of the most rapacious class of rulers ever to disgrace Europe in, you know, over the last couple 100 years. So it's like, I guess I don't know too much because he's a dickhead on Twitter, though. Like, right,
I guess I don't know too much of his context, but
how far back do you go? Because it's like, there was the British Empire, and there was the Ottoman Empire, and then before that there was the Byzantine Empire, and before that was the Roman Empire. It's like, do we go after, you know, I don't know, anyone, Bobby Caesar, because 2,000 years ago Caesar crossed the Rubicon and
they're talking specifically about families who have owned plantations and who have got a direct, you know.
I guess how direct is that line? I guess is the
Tom, are you about to cite the Drax's example?
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. In maybe this more, there's a specific instance, because I know I don't want to get into sort of like the whataboutism of like, how far back do you go? Because so many people throw that to be like, what about people who can trace lines back to ancient Egypt? And it's like
if there were any Hitlers left, all for making all of the Hitlers penniless. You know what I mean? Like, if it was just like Jeff Hitler walking around the place with his big yacht, I'd be like, that's not good.
Yeah,
but
so, I don't know. I feel that's when we get too bogged down in semantics, and then nothing will happen in any kind of sense for reparations, right?
Very specific talk.
But
case about Barbados here. It's not that hard.
And this spot, I thought was this is another interesting sort of angle, because there's a member of British Parliament, Tory MP Richard Drax, who still owns a functioning sugar farm in Barbados.
Yeah, okay.
That was bought,
well, that's pretty direct.
Like, it was like one of the in the 17th century, his family owned a Barbadian sugar plantation, and there's an estimated 30,000 enslaved people were forced to work on it, and today one of those descendants still owns this sugar farm, and still like makes money off. Like, it's a functioning sugar business.
It's said to be worth close to $266 million.
Like, presumably not using slave labor now because illegal.
I'm sure they're not doing 40-hour work weeks at $70,000 a year. Like, I'm sure the conditions are still pretty bad.
So this is like a literal, you are still benefiting from the plantation that your family obtained during slave trade.
I'm sympathetic to the argument. Like, I am. I guess my response is to say that we should be holding institutions rather than individuals personally responsible for things that, like, yes, they might have benefited or they might have indirectly benefited. But how many generations down the line is your family
responsible? Is the family bank
for
account or the family business? Like, if the family has a business or a bank account or a trust fund, is that entity, rather than the individual, is that entity, the wealth, the thing that holds the wealth that's been accruing interest for 200 years, is that the thing that is held responsible as opposed to the individual?
But again, my response is to say, like, okay, but the British Empire. Like Benedict Cumberbatch may not be the most salient example of how this wealth was transferred, as much as all of Western Europe extracting wealth for generations and generations out of the developing world. Like, it's, to me, it's like, you've got a much better argument saying like, hey, Spain, what's up with that gold everywhere that you got, buddy? How'd you get that? Like, that seems to be like a much more direct line of sight to the atrocities than this individual family 5 generations later. You know, I don't know.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, look, if Age of Empires 3 taught us anything, it's that, colonialism was pretty fucked up. So
yeah, it's not good.
Oh, 10,000%. Because there's also, speaking of precedents before, that there's a precedence of at the end of when they abolished slavery, that compensation was due.
Oh, there you go.
They paid it all. No, they paid it all to the people who owned these people.
Yeah.
Like, so it's all like, for loss of, like, quote unquote, property, here's compensation from the British government. Like, at the time, like, the British Crown paid money out to all the people who lost their enslaved people as a result of abolishing slavery. So they noted that, there is a worth on here. Like, there is a compensation is due, but they still saw it as property rather than to, the people who they abused and exploited. And funnily enough, it wasn't until 2015 that the British budget had balanced on the payment that they gave out.
Yeah. According to the British.
Well, according to the British, I think a payment of was this the whole amount, or was this just to the Cumberbatches?
11,000 was just to the Cumberbatches, I think.
Yeah, I think 11,000 to the Cumberbatches, which what was the Adam? If you have it in front of you,
6.4 million, I believe, is what in today's money allegedly.
Fuck, inflation's insane. Isn't
I would not cash that check if I was anyone at the Cumberbatch estate. I think we'll just let that one ride. That $11,000 slavery compensation check.
Yeah. But yeah, so I guess watch the space in this. I know a lot of people were talking about this being like, well, let's cancel Benedict Cumberbatch. I'm like, cancel him, I think, if he's like, I don't give a shit about what happened to people from Barbados 200 years ago. And flips the bird and then hops on a super yacht. If he
fuck off, jog on, plebs, and then flips everyone the bird.
If he says that, well, then sure. But I think it's a thing of like, well, no, I think probably any prominent white British person, any prominent white Australian person, even like probably has again, it's how far do you go back? So
I think there is a moral duty.
Yes.
And this is like more of a philosophical question and less of a news question, but it's a comedy podcast and it's free, so I do what I want. But
knock.
No.
Knock.
Who's there?
Moral duty.
Moral duty who?
Moral duty you owe. Go ahead. There's the joke in the comedy part of it. Go for it.
Worth it. I do think philosophically, I do think there is a moral duty to, and this is something that's sort of being enacted in some ways in the recent fund that was announced as a result of COP27 that happened last year, where it's basically a compensation fund. So basically, rather than the wealthy developed world saying like, all the developing nations were like, hey, we want to combat climate change as well. But also, like, you guys have had a couple of centuries of untrammeled economic development that have built your countries. And it's not really fair of you to turn around to us and say, hey, you got to stop burning fossil fuels or else when you're wealthy developed nations and we're not, considering a lot of that wealth was developed as a result of the extraction of people and resources from our countries. So, yeah, you can compensate us. Like, we're wanting to play ball with this climate change thing. But there needs to be some sort of transfer of wealth from developed nations to developing nations to help assist them with that change. That sort of thing I'm definitely on board with, because it's like, okay, it addresses kind of generational inequity. It also allows people to take action on climate change, and it's like it's a worldwide effort. We're doing it all together. I just think it gets too, like, whilst I'm all for eating the rich, I feel like it gets too complicated to tease out. There's this philosophy called consequentialism, right? It's like what you do is right or wrong depending on the consequences of what happens as a result of your actions. But the problem with consequentialism is that it gets into too much weird math as to like how are things calculated. There's the famous story that goes along with consequentialism. It's like, okay, this farmer's son breaks his leg, and they say, "Oh, that's unlucky," and the farmer says, "Oh, well, we'll see. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't." And then the war comes to town, and they recruit all the young guys, and he doesn't have to go because he has a broken leg is broken. And they, that was lucky. And he goes, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. And then his foot becomes gangrenous, and they need to cut it off. And they go, that's unlucky. He goes, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. So what I'm saying is, with that little parable, is that like the consequences over the long line of history are extremely complicated to tease out and pass from one another.
It's
like, I just think it's too difficult to draw a straight line to individual, like with compensation from the British government for your slaves, cashing a check for that seems like a pretty straight line, and maybe that money can be recouped. But I feel like in situations where it's like, oh, this is this guy, he's Edward Hitler, who had nothing to do with his father's actions, and for some reason hasn't changed his name. I feel like it's hard to hold them morally culpable for the sins of their. I think it goes against what we believe in jurisprudence in the Western world. It's like, you are responsible for your actions. There's a kind of atomized individualism there, where it's like, okay, I'm responsible for the things I do. I'm not responsible for the sins of my father, right? So,
well, yeah. I mean, I think this is a very specific case. I don't know if it's being extrapolated out to everything, but yeah, I mean,
but the precedent it sets, I guess, is my point, is that I think would be too complicated to actually pass out in the real world.
I mean, I guess depends how clear the paper trail is.
And on the situation, right? I guess because of the difference between Benedict Cumberbatch and the MP guy, right? Of like, you are still directly sort of benefiting from this sort of stuff.
And I think that's pretty rare. Like when you see, because paperwork wasn't kept, or, it gets lost to the vagaries of history as to who benefited what from whom. But yeah, when it's like your family had a plantation with a bunch of slaves and still does have that plantation, it's like, okay, well, that's pretty straightforward. Like, there's a clear line there.
That's pretty straightforward. So really, I think the moral of all this is, oi, governments, former empires, pay your reparations. Assholes.
Unless they're compelled
to.
You
love this shit.
Unless they're compelled to, they won't. Because it's not in the interest of any company, any one country, to just, set money on fire for the benefit of not their citizens. Like, and there's no political imperative there to do that. So,
well, I think the political imperative should be that we should all demand it of them.
I agree.
Because it's morally right.
Yeah, fuck it. You got me all turned around. Burn the rich. Eat them alive. Fuck them.
It's like fucking like.
As Turn George's viewpoints around.
I guess it's complicated. Is all I'm saying. Like it's
it's incredibly complicated. But
But you're right. We should do something about it. It's like slavery is a stain on our collective history, and it'd be good if we did something about that. Like it's weird when I see all these Republicans talking this pick yourself up by your bootstraps kind of rhetoric, and talking all this very racist rhetoric about welfare queens being code for black people in the inner cities and all this sort of stuff. It's like, okay, well, that if African Americans are disadvantaged, and they are compared to white Americans in society, that is a direct result of slavery. And it's, sort of Reconstruction, Jim Crow. Like, it is a result of a systematic, concerted effort across generations to disenfranchise a particular group of people. So you can't then tease out their current circumstances and rates of whatever violence or drug abuse or any of that. So you can't separate that from the history that's there. So if you want to address the problem, if you want to fix the problems now, then something needs to be done about the historic inequity there. Now, whether reparations is the right solution to that, or if there's another mechanism like heavily overinvesting in disaffected communities like this is another potential way of going about it, I don't know. But you're not going to get a more equal society until you start deliberately going about doing that, right? So
make a change for once in my... Oh, sorry, I'm just some MJ.
I got distracted.
Man in the mirror.
It is awkward that Benedict Cumberbatch played a plantation owner in 12 Years a Slave, which, given his family's history, I think is a bold choice.
Someone did say to him, I think, when he took that role, they were like,
maybe don't.
Yeah, maybe don't.
Shut up, bro. You're drawing a lot of attention.
Yeah, I mean, interesting. He tells a little anecdote of his mother saying like, maybe change your last name for like your public career, just kind of based on this stuff. And he's like, no, I won't. So, maybe he's made some, I don't know, like, I haven't read too much into those comments. So maybe he's already put his foot in it, sort of in that sense anyway.
He has suggested he took the part by way of apologizing for his family's history, but one presumes that he got paid to do that film. So I don't know how much of an apology that is.
Yeah, so I mean, unless the money you made for that movie, you then gave it to, again, it gets complicated. But yeah, anyway, so maybe not the best, and yeah, I guess conversation for another day.
But it's like, what about, let's go after Kellogg's. Let's go after some guys with some real money. You know what I mean? They're like anti-masturbation evangelical fascists. Do you not know that's why Kellogg's cereal was created?
No, it's all coming back to me.
Or like the Vita Wheats thing where they're like, no, healthy living means like healthy mind, body, and soul, and that means you don't masturbate. Like, it's all a bunch of very fucked up history that is behind some of the very largest companies in on the globe. So
fucking Kellogg's rooster just like staring at you,
while you jack off.
Don't you touch it? Don't touch it. Like.
Now I have to go. So on that note,
Adam's got a sunset to catch. So very romantic. If you hadn't already like proposed to your fiance, I would have suspected that this was the moment you were going to be doing it. In which case, like, why the hell are you sweating it up in a room?
I am sweating
on this hot afternoon on a Sunday evening with us before you go do the most important thing of your life. But you've already done it. So I don't know. You're just going to see a sunset, and I think that's nice. George, run us out.
All right. With that said, we have been, we are, and we always will be Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Make sure you follow us on all the bullshit social medias that are ruining the world, that have, do, or ever will exist, at our handle, Unnatural Show. That's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. And you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at George Tsipos.
You can follow me on Twitter at Tom D. Heath.
You can follow me to the bus stop.
I think you gotta come up with a new. You can't just say the same.
No, yeah, I can.
It's more of like an improvisational activity. It's like you follow.
Going to the bus stop.
Follow us, but you're not going to. And you've used that one before, so I just feel as though you could really just making it just like take 5 seconds before the show, just jot something down. Follow me down to the beach where I'll be watching the sunset.
Man, you could don't follow me to the beach. I'm going to the beach by myself.
You've just asked them to, so you did this.
What? You did this?
Are you going to the beach to watch the sunset?
No. Yes. Maybe. Not with you guys.
Follow Adam to Elston Wick Beach, where he will be at in approximately 13 to 15 minutes. Postcode 3186. Thanks for listening, guys. I love your faces. We'll see you next week.
Adam was murdered after this.
It's going to become a true crime podcast where we find your murderer.
Yeah, we never saw Adam again. He went paddleboarding and washed up in a secret military installation.
I'm pretty sure he got abducted by the Russians in a submarine. Pretty sure that's what happened.
Right. No, the paddleboard thing really happened to some other people.
Oh.
Just recently. You didn't read about this? I didn't chuck it in the rundown.
No, that's...
How much longer have we got? I could go through it now.
No, that's sad, and I want to go now because I've just put my foot in it. Thanks, bye!